If hard times come knocking in 2026, and I am not saying they will, but if they do, the folks who weather it best will not be the ones with the most money in the bank. They will be the ones who remember how to do things with their own two hands. I have lived long enough to see a few downturns come and go, and I will tell you something I have learned, plain and true. The household that suffers least in a lean year is not the richest one on the street. It is the one that never forgot the old skills, the skills your grandmother and grandfather knew without even thinking about them. And most of those skills have been quietly slipping away, one by one, while nobody was watching. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, find your good chair, the one that fits you just right, and settle in with me a while. Because I want to walk you through 20 of those forgotten skills, the ones that matter most when money gets tight. 20 things that cost almost nothing to learn and could save you more than you would believe. And I will tell you this right up front, so you have something to listen for. There is one skill near the very end of this list, just one, that I believe matters more than all the others put together. It is not the one you would guess. It is quieter than that. But when the chips are down, it is the one that holds a household together when everything else is shaking. I will get to it, but not yet. Let it sit in the back of your mind as we go. And while you settle in, do me one small kindness. Tell me down in the comments where you grew up and whether the folks who raised you knew these old ways. A farm, a small town, a city apartment with a grandmother who could stretch a dollar till it hollered. I would dearly love to know. There is a whole life held inside the skills a family passes down if you know how to read them. Now, let us begin. Number 1. Baking your own bread. There was a time when nearly every kitchen in this country filled up with that warm, yeasty smell on baking day, and a child knew, just from the smell drifting down the hall, that all was right with the world. Your grandmother did not think of bread as something you bought. She thought of it as something you made 2 or 3 loaves at a time, with flour and water and yeast and a little salt, and her own hands working the dough on a floured table. I remember standing on a kitchen chair as a small boy, watching those strong, flour-dusted hands push and fold and turn, push and fold and turn, and being told I could punch the dough down when it had risen, which felt like the most important job in all the world. Now here is the takeaway you can use tomorrow. A loaf of bread baked at home still costs you less than $1 in ingredients, while the store wants $3, $4, $5 for the honest kind. When money gets thin, that difference adds up fast across a year. And a family that eats a lot of bread can save a real sum just by baking it. And bread making is not hard, no matter what anybody tells you. It is patient work, forgiving work, and once your hands learn the feel of a good dough, they never forget it. You can start with the simplest loaf there is. No special equipment, just a bowl and an oven and an afternoon. It is one of the very first skills I would pick back up if a hard year came calling. Number 2, mending and sewing. There was a time when a tear in a shirt or a popped button did not mean a trip to the store. It meant a needle and thread and 10 quiet minutes by the lamp. Every household had a sewing basket, and every grown person, man or woman, knew enough to fix a seam, sew on a button, take in a waistband, or patch a worn knee. Clothes were made to last and made to be repaired, and a good coat might serve a family for 20 years and 3 children. I can still see my grandmother licking the end of the thread to a point, holding the needle up to the window light to find the eye, and stitching while she talked, never once looking down at her hands, as if her fingers had a mind of their own. Here is the takeaway. In a downturn, the money you do not spend is worth more than the money you earn, because there is no tax on it and no drive to the store. Learning to mend a garment instead of tossing it can save a family hundreds of dollars across a hard year, especially with growing children who go through clothes like water. A needle, a spool of thread, and a few buttons saved in a jar. That is all the kit you need to start, and a torn pillowcase is a fine place to practice where no harm is done. Number 3, canning and preserving. I can still see the rows of mason jars lined up on the cellar shelf, glowing like jewels in the dim light, tomatoes and green beans and peaches and pickles, the whole summer caught and kept for the cold months ahead. When the garden gave more than the family could eat, nothing went to waste. It got put up. Now, canning takes a little care, and you want to follow a trusted, up-to-date guide and the proper steps so your food stays safe. Never guess at it. But the takeaway is this: buying food cheap when it is plentiful and in season, and keeping it for when it is dear, is one of the oldest money savers there is. When prices climb, the family with a full pantry shelf is the family that sleeps easy. You do not have to start big. A few jars of jam from cheap summer berries will teach you the whole rhythm of it. Number 4. Gardening a few staples. Your grandparents did not grow a garden for a hobby. They grew it because it fed them. And here is the thing folks forget: you do not need a farm. A few tomato plants, a row of beans, some greens, a patch of potatoes, even in buckets on a porch, will give back far more than the few dollars in seed you put in. There is a deep satisfaction in eating something you grew yourself, a satisfaction no grocery aisle can match. The takeaway for a lean year: a packet of seeds costs a couple of dollars and can yield a whole season of food if you tend it. Start small, just 1 or 2 things you actually like to eat, and let your confidence grow alongside the plants. The skill of coaxing food out of a little patch of dirt is one nobody can ever take away from you. Number 5. Cooking from scratch. This may be the biggest money saver on the whole list, so listen close. That generation bought ingredients. We buy products. They bought flour and beans and a few vegetables and made 100 meals from them. We buy the 100 meals already made, each one in its own package, each one marked up 2 and 3 times over. Your grandmother could turn a few humble things into a supper that the whole family remembered for the rest of their lives. The takeaway is simple and powerful. Learning to cook real food from simple, cheap ingredients is the single biggest grocery saving most families will ever find, bar none. When a recession bites, the boxed and frozen and takeout habits are the first thing that drains the wallet dry, and they drain it faster than almost anything else in a household budget. A pot of beans and rice, seasoned with care, an onion softened in a little fat, a handful of herbs, costs pennies a serving and fills a belly just fine, and warms a kitchen besides. You do not have to be a fancy cook. You only have to learn a half-dozen honest, cheap meals you can make in your sleep and rotate through them, and you will eat better and pay less than you ever did from a package. Number 6. Stretching a cut of meat. There was a time when a single good cut of meat was made to last across days, not eaten in one sitting. The Sunday roast became Monday's soup and Tuesday's hash, and not a scrap was wasted. Your grandmother knew how to take a cheap, tough cut, the chuck or the shank, and cook it slow and low until it fell apart tender as anything. Here is the takeaway: the cheap cuts are still cheap. They have just been forgotten because they take time, and we have all gotten in a hurry. When money is tight, learning to stretch one cut across 3 meals and to make the cheap cuts shine with nothing but patience and a low oven opens the whole meat counter back up to you. 1 pound of meat, cooked the old way, can flavor a week of meals instead of vanishing in a single dinner. Number 7. Making broth from bones. Do not you dare throw out those bones. In the old kitchens, the chicken carcass, the ham bone, the beef bones, all of it went into a big pot with an onion and whatever vegetable scraps had been saved, and simmered all afternoon into a broth so rich and nourishing it could carry a family through a sick week or a thin one. I can still smell it, that deep, savory smell that filled the whole house by late afternoon and meant supper would be warm and good no matter how thin the week had been. The takeaway: the bones you are throwing away right now hold the most flavor and the most goodness of the whole animal, and they are free, because you already paid for them when you bought the meat. A pot of homemade broth turns a handful of scraps and a wilting carrot into soup that feeds a family for next to nothing, and it freezes well besides, so you can keep it on hand against a lean week. Save your bones in the freezer until you have enough for a pot. It is just about the closest thing to free food there is. Let me pause right here, just a moment, because you have been so kind to sit with me this far. If these old skills are stirring something in you, if you find yourself nodding along thinking, yes, that is how it was, that is how it should be, then I would be so glad to have you here with us regularly. Just tap that subscribe button, no fuss, and you will not miss the next story. We are a quiet bunch here, folks who remember, folks who believe the old ways are worth keeping alive. You belong with us. Now, back to the list. Number 8. Keeping a budget in a notebook. Before there were apps and screens, there was a little notebook and a pencil, and in it your grandmother wrote down every penny that came in and every penny that went out. She knew, to the dime, where the money stood, and that knowing was a kind of power. Nothing slipped through unnoticed. I remember the little stub of pencil she kept tucked in the spine of that book, and the way she would lick the tip before she wrote, and how the columns marched down the page in her careful hand, neat as soldiers. Here is the takeaway, and it is one of the most important on this whole list. You cannot save what you do not see. In a downturn, the family that writes it down, that knows exactly what comes in and what goes out and where it all goes, is the family that stays ahead of trouble instead of being surprised by it at the end of the month. You do not need anything fancy, no app, no spreadsheet, nothing that costs a dime. A cheap notebook and a pencil at the kitchen table, 10 quiet minutes once a week. That simple old habit has carried more families through hard times than any clever scheme ever dreamed up, because it turns the vague worry of money into plain numbers you can actually do something about. Number 9. Basic home repairs. There was a time when a man or a woman would not dream of calling somebody and paying somebody for a job they could do themselves in an afternoon. A dripping faucet, a sticking door, a loose hinge, a running toilet, a cracked window pane. These were household chores, not emergencies. Now, I will say plainly, you leave the big things, the gas and the heavy electrical, to the licensed folks, always, no exceptions. But the takeaway for the small jobs is this: a simple repair you do yourself might save you a service call that costs more than the part by 10 times over. Keep a basic toolbox, learn a few simple fixes, and watch your bills shrink. When money is tight, the difference between a household that can fix its own small troubles and one that must pay for every little thing is the difference between getting by and falling behind. Number 10. Sharpening tools. A dull knife, a dull pair of scissors, a dull saw. In the old days that was nearly a sin, because a dull tool is a wasted tool, and it is a dangerous one besides, since it slips where a sharp one bites clean. Your grandfather kept a whetstone by the back step and put an edge on the kitchen knives every so often, and those knives served the family for 50 years. Here is the takeaway. We have gotten into the habit of throwing out a dull thing and buying a new one, but a knife that is sharpened lasts a lifetime, while a knife that is replaced costs you again and again. Learning to put an edge back on a blade is a small skill that saves real money and makes every job in the kitchen and the yard easier and safer. Number 11. Darning socks. Now here is one that has very nearly vanished from the earth. There was a time when a hole in the heel of a wool sock did not mean the sock went in the trash. It meant somebody sat down of an evening with a darning needle and a little wooden egg and wove the hole closed, stitch by stitch, good as new. The same went for the elbows of sweaters and the knees of trousers. I remember the little basket of socks waiting to be darned, and how my grandmother would work through them of a winter evening with the radio playing low, turning ruined things back into good ones, one quiet stitch at a time. The takeaway is not really about socks at all. It is about a whole way of seeing the world. That generation looked at a small hole and saw a thing worth saving, not a thing worth replacing, and that one difference in thinking saved them a fortune over a lifetime. In a lean year, that habit of mind, repair before replace, mend before discard, Fix it before you buy another is worth more than any single trick on this list because it quietly changes how you treat every single thing you own, from your socks to your shoes to your old reliable car. Number 12. Bartering with neighbors. Before everything had a price tag, neighbors traded. You had eggs and your neighbor had a knack for fixing engines. You could sew and the fellow down the road could split firewood. So you traded, skill for skill, goods for goods, and no money ever changed hands, and everybody came out ahead, and what is more, you came out friends. Here is the takeaway, and it matters more than ever in a hard time. When money is scarce, what you can do for one another is worth gold. Get to know your neighbors before you need them. Trade what you have for what you lack. A community that helps itself is far stronger than any one family standing alone, and it always has been. Number 13. Foraging safely. There was a time when folks knew the land around them and what good things grew on it. The blackberries along the fence line, the wild greens in spring, the apples on the old tree nobody owned anymore. Free food for those who knew where to look. Now, I want to be very careful here, and you must be too. You never, ever eat anything wild unless you are absolutely certain what it is, learned from a trusted expert or a good local guide, and confirmed beyond any doubt, because some plants and mushrooms will do you real harm. But the takeaway, done safely and slowly, is a gentle one. There is free food growing closer to home than most folks ever realize, and learning to recognize even a few easy, common, safe things, the kind your local experts can show you for certain, adds a little something to the table that costs nothing but the walk. Number 14. Keeping hens. There was a time when nearly every household, even in town, kept a few hens in the yard, and nobody thought it the least bit strange. Those hens turned kitchen scraps into fresh eggs every single morning, and the eggs were warm when you gathered them. I remember the soft clucking and fussing as you opened the coop on a cold morning, the straw warm beneath the hens, and reaching a hand under to find an egg still warm from the nest, which is a small wonder that never once got old. Here is the takeaway for a tight year. Where you are allowed to keep them, and you will want to check your local rules first, 3 or 4 hens will keep a family in eggs nearly year-round, for the cost of a little feed and a little care, and scraps that would otherwise go in the bin. They are cheerful, easy creatures that practically raise themselves. Folks are rediscovering this right now, all across the country, the coop going back up in the suburban backyard, and I think their grandparents would be proud as anything. There is a quiet security in knowing that no shortage and no high price and no empty shelf at the store can take your breakfast away from you. Let me stop again, just for a breath. We are about 3/4 of the way down the list now, and that one skill I promised you, the one that matters more than all the rest, it is coming, and it is closer than you think. But before we get there, if you are finding value in these old ways, do an old fellow a kindness and subscribe, so we can keep doing this together. It costs you nothing, and it means the world to me. Now, onward. Number 15. Making do and reusing. This was the great quiet genius of that whole generation, and it has a name they used to say without irony. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. The glass jar became a drinking glass and then a place to keep nails. The worn-out shirt became cleaning rags, and then, when even those wore through, stuffing for a cushion. The flour sack became a dish towel and then a little girl's dress. Nothing had just one life. Here is the takeaway. Before you throw a single thing away, ask the old question. Is there another use left in this? In a downturn, that one habit of mind, finding the second and third life in things you already own, can cut your spending more than any coupon ever printed. Number 16. Simple carpentry. There was a time when a man could build a shelf, fix a fence, repair a chair, hang a door, all with a handful of tools and a little know-how passed down from his own father. He did not buy a new table when a leg came loose. He fixed the one he had. The takeaway here is plain. A few simple woodworking skills, measuring true, driving a screw, joining two boards square, mean you can build and repair the things around your home instead of buying everything ready-made at a markup. When money is tight, the ability to make a needed thing from a few cheap boards instead of buying it new puts real dollars back in your pocket and real pride back in your chest. Number 17. Food storage and the root cellar. Before every home had a humming refrigerator, families kept food cool and kept it for months in a root cellar, a cool, dark corner of the basement or a little dugout room where potatoes and onions and carrots and apples and squash could rest all winter long without spoiling. They knew which foods kept and how to keep them. Here is the takeaway, and you do not need to dig a cellar to use it. Knowing that potatoes and onions and winter squash and many root vegetables will keep for weeks and months in a cool, dark, dry spot means you can buy them cheap and in bulk and not waste a thing. In a lean year, a well-kept store of foods that last is a kind of quiet insurance against every high-priced week ahead. Number 18. Washing and line drying. There was a time when wash day meant the clothes went out on the line to dry in the wind and the sun, and they came back smelling of fresh air in a way no machine has ever managed to bottle. The dryer is one of the hungriest machines in your whole house, eating electricity by the bucketful every time it runs. Here is the takeaway. A clothesline costs a few dollars and runs on sunshine. Hanging your wash to dry, even part of the time, even just on the good days, cuts a real bite out of the power bill, and it is gentler on your clothes besides, so they last longer too. When every dollar counts, that free wind and free sun start to look like the bargain they always were. Number 19. Making your own cleaners. There was a time when a household kept its whole home spotless with little more than vinegar, baking soda, a bar of soap, and a little elbow grease. 1 bar of soap washed the dishes, scrubbed the floor, did the laundry, and cleaned the children's hands before supper. Compare that to the crowded cabinet of bottles we buy today, each one for just one job, each one marked up high. Here is the takeaway. A few cheap, simple basics will clean nearly everything in your home for pennies on the dollar, and you always want to use them sensibly and never mix cleaning products together. In a tight year, swapping a cabinet full of expensive bottles for a few honest basics is one of the easiest savings there is, sitting right there in plain sight. And now, here it is, the skill I told you to listen for, all the way back at the start. The one I believe matters more than all the other 19 put together. And I will tell you honestly, it is the humblest one on the whole list. Number 20. Cutting hair at home. Now, you might be thinking, that is a small thing, a haircut. But sit with me a moment, because it is not really about the hair at all. In the old days, the kitchen haircut was a regular thing, a parent with a comb and a pair of scissors and a child on a stool with a towel around their shoulders, and it saved real money, week after week, year after year, across a whole family. Run the numbers across a household over a hard year, and the savings on haircuts alone will surprise you. But here is why I saved it for last, and why I believe it matters most of all. It is the perfect picture of the whole spirit of this list. It is taking something you always handed off to somebody else, always paid somebody else to do, and quietly learning to do it yourself, at home, with your own hands, for your own people. That is the real skill, not the haircut, the willingness, the simple, brave decision to say, I can learn to do that myself. Because every single skill on this list, all 20 of them, comes down to that one thing in the end, the willingness to do for yourself what the modern world has trained you to pay for. Bread, mending, broth, a haircut, a budget in a notebook, a few hens in the yard. None of it is hard. All of it is learnable. And every bit of it puts a little more of your day and your dollar back into your own hands where it belongs. That is why I saved it for last. Because the haircut is not the point. The willingness is the point. And the family that has that willingness, That quiet confidence that says we can figure this out ourselves will come through any hard year stronger and closer and prouder than they went in. That is the skill that holds a household together when everything else is shaking. Not the money in the bank, the know-how in the hands and the steel in the spine. But I do not want to leave you feeling that hard times are coming for certain, because I do not know that, and neither does anybody else. What I do know is this. The generation that faced the hardest times most of us will ever read about did not despair. They got clever. They got close. They wasted nothing and wrung joy out of very little, and the habits that carried them through are the very habits that can carry us, whatever 2026 holds. Bake your own bread, mend instead of toss, stretch the cheap cut, save the bones for broth, keep a notebook and know your numbers, trade with your neighbors, make do and mend. None of it is hard and all of it is honest, and every bit of it makes you a little freer. That generation knew a secret we are only now remembering. A household is not made rich by how much it brings in, but by how little it lets slip away, and by how much it can do with its own two hands. They were the masters of both. And we can be again, you and I, if we are willing to pick these old skills back up, one at a time, on the quiet Saturdays, before we ever need them. I have thought a great deal about the people who knew these things by heart, the grandmothers and grandfathers who never once called any of this a skill, because to them it was just life, just the ordinary way you got through a week. I can see them at the kitchen table, the notebook open, the mending basket close by, the bread rising under a cloth on the counter, the jars of summer glowing on the cellar shelf. They did not have much, but they had each other, and they had their own capable hands, and in the hardest of times that turned out to be enough, more than enough. It made them rich in the way that lasts. So here is what I would love from you tonight. In the comments below, tell me which one of these 20 skills you already know how to do, and which one you would most like to learn before the year is out. Just one of each. I want to see what this good community of ours can already do, and what we can teach one another, because I will bet that between all of us, every single skill on this list is held by somebody ready to be passed along. I read every comment, and I treasure them. And if you have enjoyed sitting with me through these old skills, if it brought back the smell of your grandmother's bread or the sight of the wash on the line, then do an old fellow a favor and subscribe, so we can do this again soon. Next time, I want to take you into the pantry and show you the 7 cheap, humble foods that fed whole families through the hardest winters, foods that cost almost nothing and never let anybody go hungry. You will not want to miss it. We will keep the old wisdom alive together, you and I, one story at a time. So pour yourself one more cup, hold your people a little closer, and remember that the richest skill of all was always the willingness to do for yourself. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you next time.